Story 1. The Basement Whisperer. One night, my friends and I hatched a genius plan. We were going to sneak into the high school basement through one of the windows that was broken and never fixed. The thing about this window was that you'd have to hop a short metal gate surrounding the outside staircase leading to the basement. Not that it would effectively stop anyone, but it added that extra barrier that made you feel like you were really doing something devious when you crossed over it. We made sure there weren't any security cars nearby and hopped the gate. Crawling through the window proved difficult, considering we had to boost ourselves up and then crawl through an insanely skinny opening. But once we were in, we were in. We kind of dispersed from each other to explore different areas. One thing was for sure: the basement of the school was a mess and anything but interesting. There was little light. One small white light was on in a far corner, and the exit sign light actually produced more light than you'd think. I was looking around when I saw one of my friends in front of me. He whispered, "Let's go upstairs," so I followed him. He opened the door to the main hallway of the school. Everything was dark. I always thought there were at least some lights left on in the school at night, but no, not a single light was on. The only things that stood out were the various exit signs glowing red. I followed my friend down the hall and remember saying, "Dude, this is really creepy," to which he replied, "But it's kind of cool, right?" I realized he was right. Who knew if somebody else could be in the building besides my friends and me? Little did I know just yet, there was something much worse waiting for me. I followed my friend to the bathroom, and he went into one of the stalls. I whispered, "Hurry up," as I waited for him. It was quiet, too quiet. Then my phone rang. I picked up, and it was one of my friends, Liam. He asked, "Where the hell did you go?" "I'm up here with either Alex or Jake." I was confused. "What do you mean?" "They're with me." Liam, still on speakerphone, responded, "What?" "They're with me." That's when both Alex and Jake chimed in, saying, "Hi," through the phone. I stuttered, my mind racing to figure out what was going on. Then I heard laughter, but it wasn't the laugh of any of my friends. I looked up at the stall. There was someone looking over it at me, probably standing on the toilet. My heart stopped. I screamed, "Holy crap," over and over into the phone as I bolted out of the bathroom. After I was out, I heard the stall door slam shut behind me. I tried to run back to the basement in the dark, but it wasn't easy to find. Luckily, I managed to locate it, so I started screaming their names as I ran down the stairs. They answered, one by one, and we all scrambled to jump onto some kind of bucket by the window ledge, crawling back outside. I was the first one out, terrified that the person from the bathroom was following. Once we were all outside, I explained to them, out of breath, and laughed nervously, now that I felt safe with all of them next to me. I guess we were loud or something, because as we all started looking around at the school building, we noticed something. At one of the downstairs windows, there was someone with their hands pressed up against the glass. You could only see maybe half their face, but it was enough to make my stomach drop. "That's gotta be him," I whispered, my voice shaky. Alex ushered us to get the hell out of there. We ran fast until we were off the premises of the school. That was the end of it, but we came up with a lot of possible explanations. None of them made sense, though. The whole experience was just too strange. Obviously, we never did anything like that again. Story 2. Cemetery Games and Close Calls. I was a new student at Westwood High School in Pennsylvania, going into my junior year of high school, not knowing anyone. It was really rough, especially since everyone obviously had their friend groups sorted out by then. The worst part was lunchtime, though. My school wouldn't let juniors leave for lunch, only seniors, so I had to eat in the cafeteria. I was dreading it because I knew I'd have no one to sit with, and I didn't want to force myself into a random table. When lunchtime finally came, I walked into the cafeteria with my tray of food, looking for a place to sit. Every single table was taken, and I didn't even have the option of sitting alone. But there was one table in the corner of the cafeteria with only 2 kids sitting at it. That seemed like the least intimidating spot to sit, so I walked over and asked if I could join them. They both looked at each other, and one of them said, "Yeah." Upon sitting down, I noticed that the 2 were identical twins. They looked like they were partially of Hispanic heritage, but they didn't have accents. They honestly seemed all right. They introduced themselves as Marco and Diego, and we had a conversation. They invited me to hang out with them after school, and honestly, I figured, why not? I had to start somewhere as far as making friends. I got their numbers, and after school, I went home to drop off all my stuff. Shortly after, I got a text from Diego telling me that he and his brother were planning on hanging out. He told me to meet them at the nearby cemetery around 9 p.m., which was only a 10-minute walk from my house. He said there was a cool hangout spot near there. Plus, the first day of school was on a Friday, so we had the next day off. I had nothing to do, so I said, "Yeah, I'm down." When the time came, Diego texted me again, asking if I was still coming. I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave in a few," and confirmed that we were meeting by the road next to the cemetery. He said, "Yeah." So, I began my walk in the dark to the cemetery. The longer I walked, the more I thought about my whole move and being the new kid in high school. I kept thinking about the fact that I was literally walking to a cemetery at night to hang out with 2 kids I had just met. But anyway, I made it to the little road next to the cemetery and asked Diego where they were. He started typing right away, and he said they were in the woods, hanging by a small lake that they wanted to show me. Then, he promptly sent me his location. I made my way into the woods, pushing branches out of the way, using my tiny phone flashlight as my only light. I started calling out for Marco and Diego as I felt like I was close enough, according to the location he had sent me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. I stopped. Definitely footsteps approaching me. They were very low and slow. I called out, asking if they were trying to scare me, but no one answered. I decided this was stupid and turned to start walking back toward the road. Those footsteps I mentioned earlier, they turned from quiet and slow to fast. Before I could even react, someone had their nails digging into my neck, effectively choking me. I heard a familiar voice screaming, "Grab M! Grab M!" I managed to break free from the chokehold and sprinted toward the road. I know they followed me until the tree line by the road, but I was faster than them. I could run for miles. That's exactly what I did. I ran straight home and told my parents. They considered calling the cops, but I thought it would be better to get pictures of the nail marks on my neck and report it to the school the next day. That's what we did, and with the help of the texts I got from Diego, I was able to get the 2 students expelled. My parents made me block both their numbers, and I didn't exactly argue with that. They wanted me to confirm that these kids didn't know where we lived, and I told them, not as far as I know. Anyway, one night, about a week later, I woke up to my room feeling really cold. I heard the sound of wind blowing into my room, and when I looked at the window, I saw that it was slid completely open. I wondered if my mom came in to open it, but that made absolutely no sense. It was like 50 degrees outside that night. I walked over to it and looked down. A few feet below my bedroom window, there's a part of the exterior of my house that juts out, creating a sort of ledge under my window. My father always told me to jump onto that ledge in case of a fire. I shut the window and walked over to my parents' bedroom. I gently knocked and opened the door, and my mom groggily asked what I needed. I asked her if she had opened my window, and she sat up, saying, "No, why?" I told her, now more loudly and concerned, that my window had been opened all the way by somebody. She started shaking my dad to wake him up and check my room with me. But when he woke up, he told me to grow up and go back to sleep. I left my parents' door open as I walked back down the hall to my room, and that's when I noticed something. My door, which had been wide open when I left it, seemed to be half shut now. I pushed the door open just a little bit so I could peek through the crack and see if someone was hiding behind it. Even though I had the thought of the possibility, I never could have actually expected to see it. There was someone hiding behind my door. I screamed for my dad like a little girl. I screamed so loud, I'm sure I could have been heard 3 doors down. Just as my dad came rushing out of his room and over to me, my door suddenly slammed shut. I screamed, "There's people in my room," so loud that my dad barged into the room and turned the light on. At that moment, we saw the leg of a person jumping out my window. My dad ran to the window, then downstairs, and out the front door to attempt to chase them down. But he came back a few minutes later, out of breath, saying he didn't see anyone. I was full of energy and fear, and I was sure it was those twins that I had gotten expelled. My dad called the police, and I had to talk to them when they arrived, explaining the whole story, including the incident in the woods. My father backed up my story, but without proof of who entered the room. They said there wasn't anything they could do. They merely ordered us to lock the doors and consider installing cameras outside. As positive as I was that it was either one or both of those twins in my room, after getting through a solid couple of months of sleeping in fear, nothing like this ever happened again. Looking back now, I don't know why I was so willing to meet those kids in the woods at night. I should have realized in the cafeteria that day that they looked like trouble, and I should have stayed away. Story 3: The Substitute Teacher's Hidden Intentions.
It was the last period of the day, gym class, and we had a substitute gym teacher. He was an older man, probably in his late 40s or early 50s. I noticed when he took attendance. He did a double take as he passed me, which made me feel a bit uncomfortable. Not to sound vain, but I had always been aware that I looked older for my age, and as a freshman, I was already built like an upperclassman. The substitute told us to form our volleyball teams, then disappeared into the hall near the locker rooms for a while. The class continued normally for about 40 minutes until the bell rang, signaling the end of the period. I headed into the locker room to change, but when I tried to open my locker, it wouldn't budge. I kept trying my usual combination, but it just wouldn't work. I assumed I'd forgotten it and went to ask the substitute to help me get the list of locker combinations. He told me to wait a few minutes while he went to retrieve the list.
I waited by the office, and eventually, he returned with a book open to the page with my locker combination. Unexpectedly, he followed me into the locker room, even though there was only one other girl finishing up changing. The substitute approached my locker and tried the combination written down in the book, but it didn't work either. He tried it again, and again it failed. After each attempt, he looked at me and laughed, and I forced myself to laugh along to be polite.
It started to get weird when he put his hand on my shoulder, saying, "We'll figure this out." He tried the combination again, but it didn't work. This time, I felt his hand slowly move from my shoulder to my lower back. Feeling uncomfortable, I pulled away and grabbed my bag, saying, "It's okay, I'm late for my bus." He tried the combination once more, and miraculously, the locker opened. He smiled, but I quickly walked away. I waited until I heard the locker room door close behind me before I hurriedly changed. As I pulled my pants on and grabbed my backpack, the lights suddenly went out, and I was left in the dark. I hurried to the back exit of the locker room, the one that led outside. I felt a shiver of unease, worried that the substitute might be waiting by the door for me. giving off predatory vibes. When I reached the intersection of 2 aisles of lockers, I had to turn left to exit, but out of habit, I glanced right to check if it was clear. The only light came from a small rectangular window under the ceiling, enough for me to make out a figure he was peeking at me from around the corner of the lockers. My heart raced and I ran for the door. The substitute followed me, calling out, wait, it's not what it looks like," but I didn't stop. I sprinted outside into the rain and made my way home, reflecting on what had just happened. By the time I got home, soaking wet, it dawned on me that he had probably altered my locker combination to isolate me. I dreaded imagining what his plan might have been when he cut the lights, and I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone about it. Not my parents, not my friends. I kept it to myself, too scared and too embarrassed to speak up. Later that school year, I had a meeting with my history teacher, Mr. Thompson, to make up some missed lessons. The grading system in his class was linear attend class and take your weekly quizzes. And you get in it, but I had missed 2 lessons near the end of the quarter. Leaving me with a B, I asked if there was any way I could make up the work. And though he was reluctant, he agreed to let me come in during lunch to practice in one of the classrooms downstairs. I showed up the next day with my history notes and went to the basement level of the school where the history department was located. It was always dark and eerily quiet down there, and I always felt uneasy when I had to go. The lights were often dim and few people ever went down there except the teachers. The classrooms were small, but they were also used for storage, and I had only been in them a few times. I fumbled for the door handle, hoping to step into the hallway to figure out what happened. I used my phone's dim screen to light the way, just enough to see a door at the end of the hallway creak open. There was a sound of something being dragged across the floor like a heavy plastic container, and then a deep, animal-like breathing followed by grunting. I froze. A large plastic container was pushed out of the room into the hallway. At that point, I quickly turned off my phone screen and slipped back into the room, shutting the door as quietly as I could. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat there in the darkness. I had no idea who it was or what they were doing, but the fact that the lights had gone out and someone was down there with me made me nervous. The silence stretched on and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was near. Suddenly, I had a sense that I wasn't alone in the room. I turned on my phone screen for a split second, and to my horror, I saw a figure standing in the corner of the room, just a few feet away from me. I pretended not to see them, but then I heard footsteps approaching. A hand suddenly patted my shoulder twice, then gripped it hard. Panicking, I reached for the door handle, struggling to find it in my fear. But when I finally got it open, the person behind me tried to push the door shut. I was already out of the room and sprinting up the stairs before they could stop me. I ran up the stairs and into the main level of the hall where the lights were still on. Out of breath, I found Mr. Collins and told him what had happened. He called security and they checked the basement. They came back upstairs and said that, besides a few moved equipments, no one was down there. The rest of the period was uneventful. Mr. Thompson canceled his history lesson, and I sat with him telling the whole story to a group of students. Without cameras in the music hall, there was no way to catch whoever was down there. It seemed they had been trying to steal some expensive equipment, but who knows what else. The next day, I was called into the dean's office to give my story, and the rest is history.